Mmm.
Hi, and welcome back to ConTinual. It's another episode of Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we have got a full house, so if you don't have it on your to-be-read list, you will by the time we're done. So let's go around and see who all is bringing stuff to stack up that list of stuff that you'll get to reading by next year. So, Lex, you're up first.
Oh, gosh, I wasn't expecting to be first. Hi, I'm Alexandra Christian, and I write primarily paranormal and contemporary romance, mostly paranormal. And I'm here promoting my new book, House Song.
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books, and I also write under a variety of pen names in all lengths and genres. And I'm here talking about this particular pen name, A.E. Stanton, and my new release, which is mosaic novel, The Dawning of the New West.
Huh? You're up.
Okay, I was just looking for a photo. I'm T.A. Moore. I write a variety of things, contemporary, urban fantasy, and crime. I'm here promoting Sting in the Tail, which is my latest reveal, which I don't have a picture of, but there it is. Can't see it very well, but that's it.
Dennis.
Hi, I'm Dennis Myers. I write science fiction. My series, Rise of the Automated Empire, is starting publication as of this month. So as of October 13th, Final Assembly, the first novel, will be out.
Layla?
Hi, I'm Layla Reyne. I write LGBTQ romance and romantic suspense. And I am here for Icarus and the Devil, which is my first paranormal romantic suspense. So jumping into the paranormal realm.
Susan?
I am Susan Roddey. I write mostly dark fantasy and horror, and I am here with this one, which, as a matter of fact, just released today.
Becke?
Good timing.
Becke Turner. I write in contemporary romance, and my new release is Flight Without Wings, and it's number 8 of my Clock Tower romance series.
And Leona?
I'm Leona Wisoker. I write across a bunch of different genres, sometimes all at the same time. Mostly I focus on fantasy and the fantastic. I'm here tonight to talk about my latest release, which I do not have a cover of at the moment. It's called Nothing Changes, and it's a collection of short stories and side information set in the world of my 6-book series, Children of the Desert. As a bonus, I just found out that my short story, The Silver Tree, went live at Abyss and Apex today. It's a sci-fi story reimagining an old myth. So that's me.
So let's start by diving into, what are the worlds we're going to be falling into? What are the stories? What are the big setups we're going to be falling into? So Lex, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, Hellsong is a paranormal romance that takes place in a post-Katrina New Orleans, which, strangely enough, I have never actually been to New Orleans. I'm not really sure why I said it there. But it is about a girl who has amnesia, and she's been trying to piece her life back together by working in a bookstore, and she meets a guy by chance one night, and she doesn't realize that he's a demon, but he knows exactly who she is. And then there is an angel who has been watching her for reasons that over the course of the story that you'll find out, and he is trying to keep her from this demon. So of course, all she wants is the demon. So that's kind of where we are.
Sounds like a couple of nights on Bourbon Street I've had.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, what's the world we're going to be falling into on this one?
The setting for The Dawning of the New West is set in the far, far future. It's post-apocalyptic, and in the first part of like I said, it's a mosaic novel, so it's 3 novellas together. In the first one, you discover that you see how the world becomes post-apocalyptic. You see what happens when there's a giant solar flare that slags everything. And then the next story jumps you over 200 years later, and you see how everybody is surviving. And basically, those who have survived this have reverted to an Old West kind of setting and setup. Nobody trusts electricity anymore. They haven't trusted it for now centuries. And so they're not trying to strive for those kind of progressions. But the series then follows a group of people who are looking for the last city where the light never went out. And that's their goal to find. They don't find it in book 1, just FYI.
Spoilers.
I want to set the scene on that. They're not finding it in book 1.
DA?
Sting in the Tail is an urban fantasy, and it's part of the Carnival of Mysteries series. So there's a visit to the carnival as well. But basically, it's my main character is going back home because his father has died. But it turns out that when your father was a serial killer and a part-time warlock, you really have to take that inheritance with a pinch of salt. So he ends up caught up in the debts that his father had incurred to various local things. And as it turns out, the supernatural world does not consider death a way to dissolve your debts. So he has to try and work his way through that with a limited amount of magical knowledge and just a great deal of annoyance at the fact that his father has managed to screw up his life again.
Dennis.
Well, mine takes place 1,000 years in the future. It starts with a young woman on the moon. She's lived there, of course, her whole life. And she's going on vacation to a place where it's like a theme park where you can strap on wings and fly around. Second chapter, you're introduced to the serial killer. Meanwhile, the corporate federation, which doesn't control the moon yet, is trying to make their move and force Luna into the Confederation.
Layla?
Yeah, so Icarus and the Devil is set in an alt version of San Francisco called Yerba Buena. It's about 30 years after the Rift, which is the magical equivalent of the Loma Prieta earthquake, effectively, where chaos and nature have gone to war. And Icarus is a vampire courtesan who finds himself indebted to a mobster, and the mobster wants him to seduce and ferry, quote, the devil to his death. And the devil is a moniker for a vigilante that's basically a thorn in the mobster's side. And of course, that doesn't go too well when you end up falling for your target.
Love and blood.
Yeah.
Susan.
Okay. In Spades is the first of 4, and the whole series is kind of a twisted retelling of Alice in Wonderland. My main character, Alice, she is the great, I believe, granddaughter of the original Alice from the other stories. There's a prophecy, a whole bunch of crazy people, a couple of rabbits that aren't actually rabbits. There's clockwork armor and an absolutely ridiculous cat and a whole bunch of trouble, and everybody in Wonderland trying to kill her because she's supposed to be reuniting all 4 of the courts. Like I said, it is book one, and it's kind of a big one, actually. I don't usually write books that big, but it's a lot of fun. It's been 4 years in the making, and I just hope that it lives up to all the hype.
Becke.
Mine's kind of easy going compared to all of yours. This is a Secret Base second chance story. It's written in the Arabian Horse show world, and it delves into passion versus balancing passion and reality in your life. And if you've ever been I was a horsey girl, so it is bitten by the bug, if you will, and it's how this particular woman navigates this horse bug, if you will, that she has this passion in her life in the Secret Baby.
Leona?
So the short stories in Nothing Changes are set in the world of the Children of the Desert series, which is a 6-book series that I've been working on for probably close on 15 years at this point. So along the way, I collected a whole bunch of side stories and informational bits and whatnot. And so pulled those all together for that. The basic framework of the world is that it's a completely fictional world in which humanity started out dependent on an ancient race of creatures called Harethe. Harethe. Singular Harethe. Hare is the plural, Harethe is the singular. Sorry, long day. Their main goal is the survival of their own species, and they find out that they can crossbreed with humans. And so, as they say, a match is made in hell. So by the time the series kicks off, humanity is split into several distinct groups. The Desert Lords, who directly serve the Hare, the people who serve the Desert Lords, and the political entities arranged around supporting the Desert Lords. And then there's a whole section to the north that don't know anything about the Hare and don't want to.
So diving a little bit deeper, and Jenny, I'm going to go to you this one first because I know we get to meet a lot of different folks in this one, right? So, every book, it's we get the great setups, we get the great story, but it's really the characters we're there to meet and hang out with, right? So who do we get to hang out with and go on this adventure with?
In the first story, which basically the Darkening, where you're going to watch the world slag, were the characters in utopias. They're walled cities that, they're glass domes around everything and everything's safe and nobody has to work and the computers are doing everything and blah, 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 blah. And the unworthies are not in the cities. So those are the people that weren't deemed good enough, and they're, scraping out existences like people do now, right? They're in farmlands and things like that, or they're in prisons. And the computers take you to the prisons, lock you in there, and take care of you, supposedly. So you're meeting some characters that are in these dome cities, one of whom is young, and he is not satisfied. And they have shunts in the backs of their necks to keep them happy, right, with all the drugs and everything else. And he's frustrated, and he pulls his shunt out, and he pulls out his girlfriend's shunt. The other character we're following there is a scientist. She's like the last scientist that exists in this world, and she's just stubbornly loved science even as a little kid. There was no reason to. Nobody cared, but she's found the books and she does all this stuff. And she's the one sounding the warning that Betelgeuse has gone supernova several hundred years already, and it's coming, right? And it's not supposed to affect our sun at all, and yet she has redone the calculations, and it will. It's going to cause a problem with our sun. So she and the only person who's ever listened to her is Nick, and Nick has left the cities. He was her father's friend, and he's the only person that listened. Her family didn't listen, everything else. So Nick's out in the farmland, so you get to see how they're doing. And so Aaron and Glenda are shuntless when the solar flare hits. Melissa has refused to have one, and she and Ken, her boyfriend, are leaving trying to leave the dome to get to the farmlands before the flare hits. So you see all the madness and what happens when all those drugs release into people all the time, all at once. Some people die instantly, and some people mutate into what this world calls mutations and we would call zombies. So that story, do they make it? Do they not? I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, of course they do, because there's more stories following. And in those stories, what you're meeting people who have, when the solar flare hit, the computers slag, and that means the computers opened all those doors for the prisons. And so now what you have are prison compounds that become towns, and they're run exactly like you'd think. The meanest, nastiest SOB is in charge, right? And the people under him are just as mean and nasty. And so it's a very, very difficult existence, but it's not the only existence out there. And you're following characters who, I never really explicitly say this, but I know that one set are Aaron and Glenda's descendants, and one set are the set from the Farmlands descendants that will end up joining together and going on. Like I said, the main characters going forward are Deacon and Josie. And Josie is trying to save her sisters from a horrible, horrible existence in Horsetown. And Deacon is the man she has discovered that can actually help her. And so you're following them. And Deacon is the person who firmly believes that there's a city still going with light. And he's like the beacon of hope in the series. And so that's kind of what's going on. So you're following them, and together Deacon and Josie are pretty unstoppable.
Yeah. So who are we going to get to meet?
So the main character in Sting in the Tail is Ledger Conroy. His father was their county's most famous, or rather infamous, son, in that he's their only serial killer. And also, sort of on the side, he was a warlock. And Ledger was actually was the reason that he was caught. So he left town years ago, never planned to come back. But then he got the news that his father had died. So he came home just to make sure everything was sort of salted and burned, and there's nothing left that can, connect him to this past life that he's just put behind him. When he finds out that it's not that easy, and there's just all these debts that have to be paid, and some of them are to the monsters that his father dealt with, and they're oddly enough the most simple ones to deal with. He would disagree, but they're relatively straightforward. Well, it's more the debts to the people and to the town, and the history that his father caused that he has to really struggle with. And he's got a nose for trouble, and he's got one small magic talent, and that's the only talent he's got or has pursued, and he uses that to make a living. And now he has to stretch it to its limits to try and find a way out of this mess he's gotten into. And I take pride in this, because the main villain in it, my editor kept emailing me and saying, "Oh my God, he's so gross." And then later on, "How did you make him worse?" So I think that's a pretty good.
Nothing like a good villain.
That's what you want.
Nothing like a good villain. So Dennis, who are we going to be jumping in the starships with in your world?
Well, in my novels are ensemble novels. I have a cast of viewpoint characters. In the first one, I have 4. I've already mentioned Dawn, who is the young woman going flying, the serial killer. And then the third one is a man named Elliot Humboldt. He's the second most powerful man in the second most powerful corporation in the corporate federation. And he is not satisfied with that. He is narcissistic, self-centered, and he sees an opportunity to improve his position. Along the way, he hires a Mercor missile cruiser to go threaten the moon. Enter the fourth viewpoint character, which is Captain Tong Sianotai, of the Pang Yu. He and his small crew, they all interact. The stories interweave, and it's a lot of fun.
Layla, who are we diving in with on this one?
Yeah, so Icarus is the main character, and the line in the blurb is, "My name is Icarus for a reason. If there's a way to screw up a plan, I'm your man." And that's kind of Icarus. He's really good at one thing though, and that's being a courtesan, and like that's where he found his calling, right? And he's exceptional at it. And so the mobster uses that, right? Knows that you're good, and so he sends him after Adam, who's the devil. And Adam 10 years ago lost his husband and wife, and so it's been a decade without any love, without anything. And he's kind of human, but there's something else going on that calls to the vampire, basically, and vice versa. And so, they get up to all sorts of trouble as they, end up trying to turn the plan back around on the bad guy, Vincent.
Susan?
Okay, main character is, of course, the Alice, descendant of the original Alice. Her best friend in the real world turns out is the White Rabbit. The way it's structured, all of the different animal names, rabbit, caterpillar, all that, their titles corresponding to different positions in the various courts. So there's another rabbit. Rabbits are the queen's personal guard, so she's got two of those. We have of course, we bring in the twins, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and they're absolutely insane. We have knights and kings and queens. Cheshire Cat shows up in this one. Murder, mayhem, even the trees are trying to kill her. And yeah, it's a huge, huge cast of characters. I think halfway through book 2 now, and I'm up to like 18 characters that actually have screen time and, speaking parts. So, but it's, it's a lot to keep up with, but it's also, a lot of it mirrors the way the original stories moved. There's very much a card game, chessboard kind of feel to the way the different scenes play out and the way the characters interact with one another. So, yeah, there's a lot of people, a lot of talking.
Becke.
Well, you're going to be introduced to Lacey, and she is the trainer. And when the story opens, she's trying for redemption. She's almost lost her career. She was falsely accused of mishandling a horse, so she is trying to reclaim her career and her position. And let's see, she's very passionate about her career. But it turns out that she, at the first show, she not only meets the man who's responsible for being falsely accused, but she also meets the father of her baby, and that's where it starts off.
Leona, who are we going to get to be hanging out with?
So since this is a collection of stories, there's a wide range of characters and topics. As a rough sketch, you've got fledgling, good-hearted priests in a world where priests have largely turned to evil. You've got smart-ass thieves. You've got stoic mercenaries with complicated histories, origin stories for a couple of villains. There's people fighting against wrongs, fighting just to survive, people that are living around the edges of this huge political thing that's necessitated by the hooray, powerful people that are facing the consequences of their bad choices, ordinary people getting a chance at power. And one of the big fun things with this series, or with this collection, is that I was actually able to put in a lot of stuff like the linguistic tables for how I created my language, and maps, newly designed maps, a whole bunch of back things about side things like the horses that I have there, what kind of horse breeds that I have, because obviously you don't have Arabians, okay, or Palominos, they're called something different. So I had a lot of fun with that, and some history, couple pages of history. So yeah, it's a big wide range of stuff.
Lex?
Well, Hellsong has three main characters. The first one is Theo, and Theo is all kinds of screwed up. She begins her journey in life really strangely. She wakes up in the middle of the swamp, in the middle of Katrina, and she has no idea about her life before that. And she's, 22, 23 years old when that happens. And so she is, just kind of trying to piece her life together. She's working in a bookstore. She's very lonely. She's pining for one of her coworkers, but of course he doesn't even notice her. And she's just trying to figure out what her place in the world is. She meets up with this guy. She's trying to get into her car one night, and she drops her keys under the car, because I have a terrible fear of that happening. So that's why it's in the story. And so she's trying to crawl under her car to get to her keys, and he walks up, and she is immediately fascinated by him. He's intensely attractive because this is a romance novel. And so they have an immediate connection. She finds herself fantasizing about him all the time. And, well, he turns out to be a tempter demon, because, all the guys like that in your life always turn out to be tempter demons, right? And so then the third main character is actually kind of the one that's on the cover. And his name is Sarkel, and he is the last of the Grigori, which is a, lesser known type of angel. He's basically tasked with watching over humans, and he's the last one, and he can hear everybody's thoughts. He can hear everyone's prayers, and it's kind of his job to kind of pick and choose what he can help with and what he can't help with. Well, because he's the last one, and he's the only thing keeping goodness in the world. And so naturally they're all trying to get rid of him. Well, the main character, Theo, she is the key to making all of this, bringing the war between heaven and hell to a head. And she doesn't know that, but both of the men in her life at this point, they realize it pretty quickly. So that's where we're at.
One of the most fun parts, and pretty much we've got a good setup for this here, but it's the best part of any book often is the antagonist, especially a good evil villain, right?
I thought you were going to say the sex, and I was like, wait a minute. Not everybody's writing romance novels.
That isn't wrong. That's not wrong.
Yes, Dennis, we know you're now cranking out the romance. So,
I have a meet cute.
So looking at kind of the stories, we've got a lot of great antagonists here. We've got a lot of good dripping villains here. So TA, without getting spoilery, what's one of your favorite moments with your villain?
Well, it's actually the first time we meet him. And basically, he was once a very, very powerful demonic entity, but for a variety of reasons, he's sort of lost himself, and he's sort of losing control. So he's actually possessing things and people. He can't possess anything with the soul, but there's a lot of things that sort of look like people, but that don't have a soul. So the first time we meet him, he's just possessed this sort of scarecrow that was hooked up in the field, and he's just crawling along, and it's all falling apart because his essence is basically rotting this thing from the inside, and just wheezing, and there's a lot of like flies and gross things. And I just really enjoyed writing it. It was really disgusting.
All right, Dennis.
Ooh, it's hard to get spoilery. I have the villain, and then I have an antagonist. The business guy is the antagonist, and my favorite part was near the very end when he's returning to the corporate federation's headquarters from his trip to the moon. He had taken a bunch of Marines. During the course of events, he manages to, shall we say, tick them off. And one of the Marines fiddles with his recycling unit in his quarters on the way back. So some of the comments about how he smelled when he stepped off the ship were a lot of fun to write.
Has nothing to do with your time in the Navy, I feel sure.
Not true. Not true.
Layla, what's kind of your favorite little moment?
Well, so I'm going to divert just a little bit and go with the villain's henchman, because he, to me, is quite possibly the most interesting character in the book and will be the series, right? And so you kind of start in the first scene, which is probably the villain's best scene, and you think he's kind of just a pawn, and then, as the story goes, you kind of see more and more, and there's a scene with him and Icarus toward the end where Icarus is starting to figure out everything is not what it seems, and Icarus makes him breakfast, right? And he is just flabbergasted, like, what are you doing? Why? Like, it's the kill him with kindness thing, right? And Atlas just has no idea. He's so flustered by it that it was just a fun scene to write. It was a little bit of the comic relief in a very heavy, we're getting ready to go into the final battle kind of situation, and so it was just a fun scene. And there's a lot packed in there as far as what's coming. So,
Susan, what's your favorite villainous moment?
Oh, there are so many. The problem with this is that the way the book is structured, at least for the first one, anybody who's not in her immediate circle of people is automatically a bad guy because everybody's out to get her. My absolute favorite is the final big battle at the end with the villain, but I can't say anything at all about it because it'll totally ruin the entire story. Second to that is probably the first time she ends up on a battlefield. When she first gets into Wonderland, they end up having to go, of course they have to go the long way around because, I mean, why not? If we went straight to the White Palace, then the story would be over. So she's kind of thrown headfirst into this just absolutely vicious, bloody battle between humans and these absolutely savage playing cards. And their attempt to escape, they end up being chased by one of these playing card generals who basically, instead of having his body being the face of like a face card like you would expect with Wonderland, the face on it looks tortured, and it's just basically this giant mouth in the middle of it that's eating anything that it can get hold of. You've got the animals that they're riding are snarling just about, rabid. Of course, it's freaking her out, and the two rabbits are acting like there's absolutely nothing wrong, and this is just a normal day in Wonderland. So when they finally get out of it, she just kind of melts because she doesn't really know what else to do. But I had so much fun writing that scene. It's horribly bloody. It really is. But it was probably one of the most fun scenes in the book to create just because it was totally unhinged.
Becke.
Well, let's see. My villain, if you will, is actually her nemesis and actually the person who is responsible for her getting suspended. And so I think the most fun part was to have her beat him because, he was a win at any cost, including the cost of the animal. And she beat him in the show fair and square. And so that to me, it was based on talent and based on a connection with an animal to get them to do the best job that they can do.
Leona, what's your favorite moment? Pick a story, any story.
So what I was going to say is that most of the stories in the collection really come down to kind of people against themselves. So it's kind of hard to pick an actual villain. But a couple of the origin stories that I mentioned, one of them I particularly like. There's a villain in the Children of the Desert series called Lord Evkett. And one of the things that's always said about Lord Evkett is that he never loses. You might think that you won, but he actually just pulled you into a plan that he had anyway. So he has a million plans and you're going to fit into one of them whether you like it or not. So he's a lot of fun to write because any scene that I put him in, he has to win. No matter what, it has to go in his favor at the end of the day. So that's always fun to figure out. And the origin story was really satisfying because it starts out with him being young, like a teenager, going through trials within his people's customs and subverting them to where he gets much more out of it than he gives. And I'm not going to spoil anything beyond that, but once you read the origin story, you understand why he can do what he does in the Children of the Desert series.
Lex?
Well, I think when I was writing this book, and to be fair, I actually wrote this book in 2010. This is a new release of an old book, basically. And at that time in my life, for some reason, I was obsessed with this idea of people being everybody being morally gray. The only person in Hellsong that is truly what D&D people would call lawful good is Sarakel the Angel. Everybody else, and that's only because he's Grigori and an archangel. Everybody else is kind of not all good, but not all bad. But probably if you had to choose one villain in the book, there's a guy who's an art demon named Hauras, and Hauras is kind of like he's just an ass through the whole thing. He's kind of playing both sides against each other, and he's the one with all of the knowledge, and he loves to outsmart the guy that is kind of the antagonist, Tal the demon, who's, bless his heart, he's not real smart. But Howard is very smart. But I love all the scenes with him because I kind of got into a lot of the world building with Hell, because basically Howard, and I swear this was before the Lucifer show came out. But Howard, he owns a club, and his club is basically the portal between Earth and Hell. And so there's a lot of scenes in the book take place in that club, and some of the weird things that go on there that seem perfectly normal to the people that are there that was probably my favorite part of writing the book.
Again, New Orleans. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but there's a lot of double crossing, and there's a guy who's a denizen of Hell who's not exactly a demon, but he's definitely not. He's kind of undead, but he's the bouncer at the club, and he does a lot of double crossing, and he was really fun to write too.
Jenny?
My biggest protagonist is the world. Antagonist is the world. It's very, very harsh. There's not a lot of hope. I don't tend to write things without hope. Even my horror has hope in it in some way. It might be hope for the monster, but there's hope there. But survival in the utopian world, it comes to a crashing, horrific, terrifying halt. And it comes because of the natural world. The sun has a solar flare that slags everything. And then the world is harsh. I mean, you think back to the Old West, it was very, very harsh. Very, very difficult. And that's what the world has turned back into. It's the distances are very wide. There's not a lot of people you can trust, and there's lots of danger. My biggest antagonist group are the White Riders, that are basically gangs that ride the white roads, which are the remains of the monorail system that connected all the cities to each other. Though there's sometimes you'll see them on the tar roads, which are the roads that were created, in our era. And but really, it's survival against whatever this new West is going to throw at them. And so, to me, it's the character that is scary is the setting. The world is what's going to test them more than anything else. Yes, there are horrible things in the world, but can you survive 3 days riding to get somewhere with only the people that you're with? Can you do that? Because some people can't, right? But these people have to. So it's the hardship and the danger. And, again, there are zombies lurking back.
So I'm going to throw one last question at you guys. And Dennis, I'm going to start with you on this one. What's the favorite rabbit hole you tripped down? What'd you learn? What'd you research? What'd you figure out about the process? What's the one thing that you just sort of, surprised you out of doing the project?
The corporate federation consists of over 300 million people living in rotating habitats scattered around Earth orbit, Mars orbit, and out in the belt. Figuring out what the gravity was at each specific level, because the people from Mars want to live up here, and the people from Earth want to live down here, and then you throw in the loonies who want to live all the way near the middle. So I've actually figured out, I did the calculations to figure out what I needed to do to have this size habitat, have this kind of gravity at that level, and how people would adjust going up and down.
Layla?
Yeah, for me, it was in creating Yerba Buena. I thought I was doing paranormal. So, I won't have to do as much research, and I won't have to spend the whole time looking at the FBI org chart of who's boss. But what I ended up doing was creating Yerba Buena and the surrounding kind of Bay Area based on the North Bay and the East Bay have gone back to indigenous rule. So I went down the rabbit hole of who was on those lands first, right? Which indigenous people. And then San Francisco and the peninsula have all of the pre-mission Spanish colonial names. And then the South Bay and Central California have the post-mission names which is what we mostly know. So kind of getting all of those right, and then further digging into, the indigenous populations and whatnot, the shell mounds that exist around the Bay Area, particularly in Emeryville, which is a sacred Ohlone burial ground. But what shell mounds were, in that they would take all the oysters and all the shellfish out of the bay, and it's just where they ditched the shells, and it's this massive mound basically, and they kind of exist in various parts of the Bay Area, and Emeryville's being the biggest and the most well known. And I'd driven past it so many times and had no idea really what it was. So learning more about that was really cool.
Susan?
Well, the wording is funny because she does literally go through the rabbit hole in this one. So that's entertaining. Really, there were, I guess, two things that I really ended up having to spend a lot of time on. One was making sure that between characters and settings, it kind of stayed true to the feeling of the original, the whimsical nature, and it's dark but still kind of hopeful at the same time. As far as research goes, the thing that I learned way more about than I ever thought I would care to know would be various long-term effects of ingesting psychotropics, because the way it's set up in that world, different types of tea are likened to various drugs in our world, and different ones have different effects. And one of the things that the twins have this really bad habit of trying to spring various versions of high tea on Alice just to see how she's going to react. So it kind of took some time to figure out, okay, so what is it like? How is this going to work? And it's not going to kill her 16 hours later, is it? So again, one of those things I never thought that I would find myself researching, but here we are.
I think I remember this, Con.
Now I want some tea.
Becky?
Well, I did too. I have an air trip in this, and one of the things that I had to figure out was how long does it take to fly from one city to another, and not if you have a private plane. And my son, who just retired from the Navy, he was at home with us, and he's a pilot for American Airlines, and so I had him go through it and figure it out for me to see if I was on track with all this, and then also have, what happens. I didn't know what happens when you land a private plane. Where do you get your gas? Can you open the door? Do they have an attendant? Do they have, where do you get a rental car? And so he did all that information, helped me with all that. And then the second thing, I had shown and trained Arabian horses in earlier times. And what was interesting is how much the horse show rules have changed in that time. And I was a little surprised at them. So I had to reinvent a little bit with my particular story, because I wrote it about a person that I used to show with, and she was a pro, and she was absolutely fascinating to watch. She was probably the finest horse master I have seen ever. And actually, that's where the story originated, was from that person watching her. She was just, I can't explain it, but there are some people that are just, they have a gift. And I was good, but I never had a gift.
Leona?
So I'm going to make Becky happy because my answer is horses. So like I said earlier, I can't exactly use Arabians or Percherons in this story, so I had to come up with my own versions, which involved looking at the real world versions and saying, what features am I going to pick? How is this going to be changed? How would, what kind of horse would be in this area? What kind of horse would they use over here? How do I describe this? What variations am I not going to use for the sake of simplicity? Because we're not talking about a world like we have, where you've got different breeds in, all these different countries that are developed differently with the different terrains. It's a much narrower geographical range that horses are working through. So we can't have all these different, variations. A limited number is all I can really handle. And then, so I wound up watching all sorts of horse videos on how they move and the different gaits, and figuring out which horse is going to have which gait, and which ones are more likely to be good with dressage, and is dressage even a thing? So what's dressage anyway? And so I wound up watching hours and hours and hours of dressage and falling in love with some of this stuff. I still watch some of this. It's addictive. So I went completely down the rabbit hole and geeked out about horses and learned more than I ever thought I would, and made all my horse-loving friends very happy, because I'll go, bip, 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 and they'll go, yeah, bip, 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 bip. So now I can keep up with them a little.
Lex?
Well, I learned probably way more about angels and demons than I ever needed to know about, different hierarchies and what different religious denominations believed about angels, and some of them are very wacky. So that was kind of interesting. And I distinctly remember during that time period, and Susan can back me up on this, I watched every single movie, documentary, read every single book that I could get my hands on that featured angels and demons. I probably saw that horrible horror movie Legion like 185 times when it came out, because I was in the middle of, and I was in the middle of writing, and I wanted to pick things from different things that I liked, because us Protestants, we don't know a whole lot about that sort of thing, because we don't talk about it a whole lot in church. At least at the nice, very sedate denomination that of church that I went to as a child. So that was just, I just got completely obsessed with it. But I tend to do that anyway. If I'm writing about something in particular, I get kind of obsessed with it until I'm done. I also have more travel guides and road atlases and everything for New Orleans than I could ever possibly want in my entire life. My husband is a map guy, so he was loving it, because we had all of these maps of Louisiana. We've never been, but we have all of these maps of Louisiana and street maps of New Orleans, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that I never actually went to New Orleans is a tragedy, and probably something that's sitting there looking at this, that would be looking at this right now going, why would I read that book? Because bitch has never been to New Orleans. But yeah, I had fun anyway.
Jenny?
I've never been to space, but I write about it all the time.
See, there you go.
So, I had kind of two, but the first one was really predates writing this book. The first things I ever wrote were novels set in the Old West. And because I was learning to write on these, I became an Old West expert. So I deep dived into the Old West, like way back when. And like, it ruined so many movies for me. I can't even count anymore. Like, that's not right. So I'd already done the deep dive into the Old West. So when I decided I want to set something in a post-apocalyptic world that was in an Old West setting, I didn't have to do a lot of research because I'd done it already. I already have the 50,000 books on it. So that was my first real deep dive for research, was just the Old West, which carried over into this because now I could use it somewhere besides just my novel set in the Old West. But I was at a LibertyCon, and one of the breakout sessions was talking about Betelgeuse going supernova and how there was nothing we needed to worry about. I'm like, yeah, but are you sure? Right? And I'm thinking, every 50 years, science changes what we know because we've learned something new. So I don't have any faith at all that what we think today means Betelgeuse isn't going to slag our own sun. And so I did a little bit more research in that. Side note, the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series is science fiction set in present day. And you would be amazed at how much astrophysics that I have had to do for a soft science fiction series that's going around. So I already had all that too. So I went over there. So my deep dives on this series were deep dives I already had done, but I did them again, just, a little bit, just to be right on.
And TA, I'm going to give you the last word of the evening. What was your rabbit hole you tripped over?
It was divination, actually, because this book is part of the Carnival of Mysteries Shared World series. And in every book in that series, they visit the Carnival of Mysteries. And I wanted my character to visit the fortune teller. I'd actually been dreading this the whole book because for ages I couldn't work out how to fit this visit in. I've never been good with prompts, but I got there, and it ended up I just found I spent ages looking into the various forms of divination, and I ended up with tarot and all the layouts and the different cards and different decks, and it just all came together, and it was just the perfect feed through for the sort of the last quarter of the book, and I was just really pleased with it because I had been really dreading it, and then it all just flowed into this really smooth transition after I'd done like hours and hours online researching all the different decks and what they meant and what the sort of the differences could be and the layouts and everything. So it was a bit funny really, because I used to read tarot, when I was in high school, because for some reason when I was in school we were all mad for fortune telling. There was all like, it was a very religious school and they hated it, but everybody was mad for it. And I was really good at it because I liked telling stories, not because I could tell the future. And everybody thought I was really creepy for a very long time. I mean, they were right, but not for that reason.
Well, it sounds like we've got plenty to stack everybody's to-be-read pile with. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys, website, social media, and of course, that name and title of that new release again. So Lex, you're up first.
I'm Alexandra Christian. My new book is Hell Song. It's available on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited right now. If you want to follow me on social media, all of my social media and everything is linked to my website. It's alexandrachristian.com. I know that's so original. But yeah, that's me.
Jenny?
Speaking of originality, GiniKoch.com. I'm like the only Ginny, so, well, I'm not, but there are very few and far between. I'm all over Facebook. I'm on X, Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Pinterest. And The Dawning of the New West is available pretty much everywhere books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, so on and so forth. And please buy it. Make my new publisher with this really happy.
Yeah.
I'm Tamer. You can find all of my social media links and everything on tamerwrites.com. This book is Sting in the Tail, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. There we go.
Dennis?
I'm Dennis Myers, and my book is called Rise of the Automated Empire, Final Assembly. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Mastodon. You can find links to all of that at my website, automatedempire.com.
Layla?
Yep, I'm online at www.laylareyne, LaylaReyne.com. All of my socials are at Layla Reyne. And the new book is Icarus and the Devil. It's wide, available everywhere, and signed paperbacks are also available on my website.
Susan?
Right. My website is shroddey.com. I'm all over the internet in all kinds of places. If you go to Linktree, my site is Roddey, of course. Has everything, links to everything, everywhere to find me in any way, shape, or form possible. My new book is called In Spades. It is #1 in Wonderland War series. It is available. I know it's on Amazon right now. I don't know how far Ingram has pushed out all of the various distribution channels, but it will soon be available everywhere. And if anybody happens to be in Atlanta in 2 weeks at Multiverse, I will have both hardback and paperback copies with me. So, yeah.
Becke?
My book is Flight Without Wings, and that actually came from a proverb from the Quran about horses. And you can find me at BeckeTurner.com, and I spell my name with an E. It's Becke, and then Turner's pretty easy.
Leona?
I have 2 websites, both of which talk about the book that I just put out, Nothing Changes. The first one is my author website, LeonaWisoker.com. And the other one is my bookstore, The Scribbling Lion, where I sell my own work and that of other authors that I really love, especially small press and self-published authors. The best way to keep in touch with me or keep keep an eye on what I'm doing is to sign up for my newsletter, the Irregular Update, which comes out whenever I have something to say. You can sign up for that on either of those two websites. I've pretty much abandoned most social media. I'm marginally on Facebook, but really not. I've left Twitter entirely. I'm mostly on Mastodon. You can find me on Mastodon under Lioness Lady at mindly.social. So that's where to find me and how to keep up with me.
And I've had the pleasure being your host tonight, Jim Nettles, and you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, speculative-fiction-academy.com, creatingprose.com, and of course, here at ConTinual. And go stack up those to-be-read piles. We'll see you again soon.